Hello, I'm Reid Palmer. At Thanksgiving dinner, my father stood up in front of the entire family and announced that my sister Piper deserved everything. The house, the savings, Grandma's jewelry collection. He said I'd always been difficult and that real family takes care of those who matter. Then he handed her an envelope containing what he claimed was Grandma's will. Everyone clapped. I sat there, silent, feeling my world collapse. They thought I'd just accept it and disappear quietly. But 3 weeks later, Grandma's actual attorney showed up at my apartment with a briefcase and a very different story. What my father had read wasn't the real will. And what happened next? 67 missed calls, a lawsuit threat, and a family secret that had been buried for over 2 decades. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The dining room at my father's house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and decades of unspoken resentment. Crystal chandeliers hung overhead, casting warm light across the long mahogany table where 17 family members sat crammed together for Thanksgiving. My father had insisted on hosting this year, said it was important we all gather as a family. I should have known something was wrong the moment he said that. I adjusted my collar and tried to focus on the mashed potatoes in front of me. Across the table, my sister Piper sat like royalty, her perfectly styled hair catching the light, her smile wide and practiced. She'd always been the golden one, the daughter who could do no wrong. I was the other one, the son who asked too many questions and never quite fit the mold Dad had carved out for us. Aunt Kendall leaned over and whispered something to my cousin Eric. They both glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Uncle Jasper cleared his throat and reached for his wine glass. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with the carving knife still resting beside the turkey. Then, Dad stood up. The room fell silent immediately. He had that effect on people, commanding attention without even trying. His suit was pressed, his tie perfectly knotted, and his expression carried that mix of pride and authority that made everyone sit a little straighter. "I want to thank you all for being here," he began, his voice smooth and measured. "Family is everything. It's what my mother believed, and it's what I've tried to instill in my own household." My grandmother had passed away 4 months earlier. The funeral had been massive, filled with people from every corner of her long life. She'd been a force of nature, a woman who built her own accounting firm from nothing, and turned it into one of the most respected businesses in the state. I'd been close to her, closer than anyone else in the family. We'd spent hours talking about books, about life, about the importance of standing up for what's right even when it's hard. Dad continued, pulling an envelope from his jacket pocket. My mother left behind a legacy, and she made it very clear who should carry that legacy forward. My stomach tightened. Something about his tone felt wrong, rehearsed. "Piper has always been the heart of this family," he said, turning to smile at my sister. "She's dedicated, loyal, and understands what it means to honor family values. And so it gives me great pride to share what my mother wanted." He opened the envelope slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone was watching. "This is my mother's last will and testament," he announced. "And in it she's left everything to Piper, the house on Belmont Avenue, the investment accounts, the jewelry collection, all of it." The room erupted in applause. Aunt Kendall dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Uncle Jasper raised his glass in a toast. Piper stood up, looking appropriately humble and grateful, though I caught the flash of triumph in her eyes. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Dad's gaze finally landed on me, the warmth drained from his face instantly. "As for you, Reid, you've always been difficult, always questioning, always causing problems. My mother knew that. She saw how you stirred things up, made everyone uncomfortable with your accusations and your attitude." My throat felt tight. I wanted to speak, to defend myself, but the words wouldn't come. "You're not part of this legacy," he continued, his voice cold now. "Real family takes care of those who matter, and frankly, you've never acted like family. So I'm telling you now, in front of everyone, you need to leave. Tonight. Don't come back to this house. Don't contact your sister. Just go." The silence that followed was deafening. No one looked at me. Not my aunts, not my uncles, not even my cousin Eric, who I'd grown up with. They all stared at their plates or their drinks, suddenly fascinated by the pattern on the china. Piper sat down slowly, her hand moving to cover the envelope Dad had placed in front of her. She didn't say a word, didn't even glance my way. I pushed my chair back. The scraping sound against the hardwood floor felt impossibly loud. I stood, looked around the table one last time, then walked out. No dramatic exit, no shouting match. I just left. The cold November air hit me like a slap as I stepped outside. My truck was parked at the far end of the driveway, partially hidden by my father's luxury sedan and Piper's brand-new SUV. I climbed in, started the engine, and sat there for a moment, hands trembling on the steering wheel. Grandma wouldn't have done this. She wouldn't have cut me out, wouldn't have left everything to Piper without even a word of explanation. We'd talked just 2 weeks before she died. She'd told me she was proud of me. Proud that I'd chosen to become a social worker instead of joining the family business. Proud that I'd stayed true to myself. This didn't make sense. I pulled out of the driveway and drove aimlessly through the streets of Portland. The city lights blurred past my windows as I tried to process what had just happened. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Text after text, call after call. I ignored them all. By the time I pulled into the parking lot of my small apartment complex on the east side of town, my phone showed 34 missed calls. I turned it off completely and went inside. My apartment felt smaller than usual, the walls closing in. It wasn't much, just a one-bedroom place with outdated appliances and carpet that had seen better days, but it was mine. I'd worked hard for it, saved every penny from my job at the community center to afford even this modest space. I dropped onto the couch and stared at the ceiling. Grandma's face flashed through my mind. Her warm smile, the way she'd always listened without judgment. She'd left me a voicemail on my birthday 6 months ago. I'd saved it, never deleted it. I pulled out my phone, turned it back on, and found the message. "Reid, sweetheart, it's Grandma. Just wanted to wish you a happy birthday, and tell you how proud I am of the man you've become. Don't let anyone tell you that kindness is weakness. Don't let anyone make you small. You have my strength in you, and when the time comes, you'll know exactly what to do with it. I love you more than words can say." I played it 3 times, her voice filling the empty apartment. "When the time comes, you'll know exactly what to do with it." I sat up slowly. Something wasn't right about tonight. Dad had been too prepared, too confident. The envelope, the announcement, the public humiliation, it all felt staged. My phone buzzed again, another missed call, then another. By midnight, the count had reached 67. Not a single one was to apologize. I set the phone down and made a decision. Tomorrow, I would start digging. Because if there was one thing Grandma had taught me, it was that the truth always surfaces eventually. You just have to be patient enough to wait for it. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my father's face, heard his voice declaring me worthless in front of everyone who was supposed to care about me. By the time gray light started filtering through my apartment windows, I had already been up for an hour, staring at my laptop screen. I made coffee, strong and black, and sat at my small kitchen table. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of pipes in the walls. My phone sat next to the laptop, powered off. I wasn't ready to face whatever messages waited there. First, I needed information. I pulled up the Oregon State Bar website and started searching for estate attorneys. Grandma had mentioned her lawyer's name once, years ago, when she'd updated her will after Grandpa died. I scrolled through names, trying to jog my memory. Henderson, Harrison, Hartley. Victoria Hartley, that was it. I remembered because Grandma had joked that having a lawyer named Hartley made her think of Harley motorcycles, which she'd always wanted to ride but never had the chance. I found the law office listing, Hartley & Associates, downtown Portland, specializing in estate planning and probate law. They didn't open until 9, which gave me 3 hours to figure out what I was going to say. I spent those hours going through every conversation I could remember having with Grandma over the past year. She'd been sharp until the very end, her mind clear even when her body started failing. We'd talked about her business, about the importance of leaving things in order, about making sure her wishes were honored. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She'd never once mentioned leaving everything to Piper. In fact, the last time we'd had lunch together, about a month before she died, she'd brought up the house on Belmont Avenue. It was the property she'd bought 40 years ago when she first started making real money. 3 stories, wraparound porch, original hardwood floors throughout, worth easily over $1 million now. "That house has good bones," she'd said, stirring sugar into her tea. "It deserves someone who'll appreciate it, someone who understands what it means to build something with your own hands." I'd nodded, not thinking much of it at the time, but now those words felt heavy with meaning. At exactly 9 o'clock, I called the law office. A receptionist answered, her voice professional and slightly distracted. "Hartley and Associates, how may I help you?" "My name is Reid Palmer. I need to speak with Victoria Hartley about my grandmother's estate, Helen Palmer." There was a pause. "One moment, please." The hold music was classical, something by Mozart. I counted the seconds, 43 of them, before the receptionist came back on the line. "Mr. Palmer, Miss Hartley would like to speak with you. Are you available to come to the office today?" My heart started pounding. "Yes. What time?" "Would 11 o'clock work?" I looked at the clock. 2 hours. "I'll be there." After hanging up, I finally turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with a cascade of notifications. 67 missed calls, as I'd seen last night, plus another 15 that had come in while I slept. Text messages filled the screen, mostly from family members I barely spoke to. "Aunt Kendall, Reid, please call me. We need to talk about what happened." "Uncle Jasper, your father is very upset. This isn't helping anyone." "Cousin Eric, man, that was harsh. You okay?" And then, buried among the others, one from Piper, "You always did know how to make everything about you." I deleted that one without responding. There was nothing from Dad. No apology, no explanation, nothing. Just silence from the man who'd publicly disowned me 12 hours earlier. I showered, put on my best button-down shirt and the one pair of dress pants I owned that didn't have wrinkles, and drove downtown. Portland traffic was its usual nightmare, but I barely noticed. My mind was racing through possibilities, scenarios, explanations. Hartley and Associates occupied the 7th floor of a sleek glass building near Pioneer Courthouse Square. The reception area was all modern furniture and abstract art, the kind of place that screamed expensive without saying a word. The receptionist, a young woman with bright red lipstick and perfect posture, smiled as I approached. "Mr. Palmer?" "Yes." "Miss Hartley is expecting you. Right this way." She led me down a hallway lined with diplomas and legal certificates, then knocked on a heavy wooden door before opening it. The office inside was spacious, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the city skyline. Behind an enormous desk sat a woman in her 60s, silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, sharp eyes magnified slightly by wire-rimmed glasses. Victoria Hartley stood as I entered. "Mr. Palmer, thank you for coming on such short notice." Her handshake was firm, professional. "Please, sit." I took the leather chair across from her desk. My palms were sweating. She settled back into her seat and folded her hands on the desk. "I'm going to be direct with you, because I believe that's what your grandmother would have wanted. I received a very concerning phone call this morning from a colleague who attended a Thanksgiving dinner last night." "Your Thanksgiving dinner?" My stomach dropped. "Someone was there." "My paralegal, Julia Patterson. She's married to your cousin Eric. She called me first thing this morning, quite distressed about what she witnessed." Victoria pulled a file from her desk drawer and opened it. "Your father claimed to have your grandmother's will. He read from a document stating that everything was left to your sister Piper. That's what happened." Victoria's expression hardened. "Mr. Palmer, I drafted your grandmother's will personally. I've been her attorney for 23 years. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that what your father read last night was not the document I prepared." The room seemed to tilt slightly. "What?" "Your grandmother's actual will is here, in my office, where it's been since she signed it 6 weeks before her death." Victoria slid a document across the desk. "This is a copy. The original is in our vault." My hands shook as I picked it up. The legal language was dense, but certain phrases jumped out immediately. "To my grandson Reid Palmer, I leave the house located at 4737 Belmont Avenue, along with all furnishings and personal effects contained therein. To my grandson Reid Palmer, I leave the entirety of my investment portfolio, currently valued at approximately $1.8 million. To my granddaughter Piper Stone, I leave my jewelry collection and the sum of $50,000. I read it 3 times, unable to process what I was seeing. Your grandmother was very clear about her wishes, Victoria said quietly. She wanted you to have the bulk of her estate. She said you were the only one who truly understood what she'd built and why it mattered. But Dad said, "Your father lied." Victoria's voice was steel. "And, unless I'm very much mistaken, he's committed fraud." I sat in Victoria Hartley's office, staring at the will in my hands, trying to make sense of what I was reading. The words were clear enough, but accepting them as truth meant accepting that my father had orchestrated an elaborate deception in front of my entire family. "I don't understand," I said finally. "How could he have a fake will? Where would he even get something like that?" Victoria leaned back in her chair, her expression grim. "That's what we need to find out. But first, we need to address the immediate problem. Has your father filed anything with the probate court?" "I don't know. I've been avoiding my phone." "Check now, please. Look for any emails from the Multnomah County Circuit Court." I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and scrolled through my email. Most of it was junk. Subscription newsletters I never read. Spam about sales and promotions. Then I found it, buried between a grocery store ad and a notice about my car insurance. Subject: Notice of Probate Filing, Estate of Helen Marie Palmer. I opened it. The email was dated yesterday, sent at 4:47 p.m., right around the time I would have been driving away from Dad's house. "There's something here," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "A probate filing. It says Piper has been named as the personal representative of the estate." Victoria's jaw tightened. "Forward that to me immediately." I did, my fingers clumsy on the screen. Within seconds, her computer chimed with the incoming message. She opened it, read quickly, and her frown deepened. "This is worse than I thought. Your father moved fast. The document filed with the court lists him as the attorney-in-fact for the estate, with Piper as the representative. They've essentially locked you out of any decision-making process. Can they do that? Not legally, no, but they have done it, which means we now have to fight an uphill battle to correct it." She pulled out a legal pad and started writing notes. The court accepted their filing because they presented what appeared to be a valid will. The clerk wouldn't have had any reason to question it. So, what do we do? Victoria looked up at me, her eyes sharp. "We file a contest. We present the real will and demand that the court invalidate whatever document your father submitted. But Reid, I need you to understand something. This is going to get ugly. Your father has already demonstrated he's willing to lie under oath. Because that probate filing requires a sworn statement that the will being presented is genuine. If we move forward, we're not just challenging his authority, we're accusing him of fraud." The weight of that settled over me like a heavy blanket. He's my father. I know, and I can't make this decision for you, but I can tell you what your grandmother wanted, and she wanted you to have what she built. The question is, are you willing to fight for it? I thought about last night, about the humiliation, about the way everyone had looked away from me like I was invisible. I thought about Grandma's voicemail, her words about having her strengthen me. "Yes," I said, "I'll fight." Victoria nodded once, satisfied. "Good. Then here's what we do first." She spent the next hour explaining the legal process, the timeline, the challenges we'd face. We'd need to file an objection to the probate petition, present the real will to the court, and request an emergency hearing. She'd handle the paperwork, but I'd need to be prepared to testify. "One more thing," she said as I was preparing to leave. "Don't contact your father or your sister directly. Don't discuss this with any family members who might relay information back to them. From this point forward, all communication goes through me. Understood?" "Understood." I left her office feeling simultaneously empowered and terrified. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have. When I reached the lobby, I pulled out my phone and saw 3 new missed calls. All from Dad. I ignored them and walked to my truck. The drive back to my apartment took me past Belmont Avenue. I found myself slowing down as I approached the 4700 block, looking for number 4737. There it was, set back from the street behind a row of old maple trees. The wraparound porch Grandma had mentioned, the original shutters painted deep blue, a garden that looked slightly overgrown but still maintained its basic shape. My house. According to the real will, this was mine. I didn't stop, just drove past slowly, committing every detail to memory. Someone had put a wreath on the front door, a Thanksgiving decoration with artificial autumn leaves and a ribbon that said, "Give thanks." It felt like a mockery. Back at my apartment, I made myself eat something even though I had no appetite. A sandwich, mechanical bites that tasted like cardboard. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. More calls, more texts. I turned on the TV just to have noise in the background and tried to think about what came next. That's when someone knocked on my door. I froze. It was just after 2 in the afternoon, and I wasn't expecting anyone. The knocking came again, more insistent this time. I looked through the peephole and saw my Uncle Jasper standing in the hallway, shifting his weight from foot to foot. Against my better judgment, I opened the door. "Reid," he said immediately. "Thank God, I've been trying to reach you all day. What do you want?" He glanced down the hallway, then back at me. "Can I come in? Just for a minute?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered quickly, and I closed the door behind him. Uncle Jasper was my father's younger brother, a man who'd spent his whole life in Dad's shadow. He worked as an accountant for a mid-sized firm downtown, drove a sensible sedan, and generally kept his head down and his opinions to himself. "Look," he said, turning to face me. "What happened last night, it wasn't right." "I know it wasn't right." "No, I mean, it was worse than you think." He ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Your father called me 2 weeks ago. He told me he needed help with something, said it was about your grandmother's estate. He asked me to look at some documents, give him my professional opinion on whether they looked legitimate." My heart started pounding. "What documents?" "A will. He showed me a will that left everything to Piper. He wanted to know if it looked real, if a court would accept it." Jasper's face was pale. I told him it looked fine, that the format was correct, all the legal language was there. But Reid, I didn't know he was planning to use it. I thought he was just, trying to understand what your grandmother had done. "He fabricated it," I said flatly. "The real will is completely different." Jasper's face went even paler. "Oh, God. Reid, I didn't know. You have to believe me. I would never have helped him if I'd known what he was planning." "But you did help him. You validated his fake document." "I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." He pulled out his phone. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because this morning your father called me again. He asked me to sign an affidavit stating that I was present when your grandmother signed her will. He wants me to lie to the court, Reid. He wants me to commit perjury." I stared at him. "What did you say?" I told him I needed time to think about it. But really, I needed to talk to you first. Jasper pocketed his phone. "I'll testify. If you take this to court, I'll testify about everything. What he asked me to do, when he asked me, all of it. Your grandmother was good to me. She helped me get my CPA license, paid for my exam fees when I couldn't afford them. I owe her the truth." For the first time since Thanksgiving dinner, I felt something like hope stirring in my chest. "Thank you," I managed. He nodded. "But you need to be prepared. Your father isn't going to back down easily. He's already talking about challenging your character, bringing up old issues from when you were younger." "What issues?" "That time you got arrested at the protest during college, the argument you had with him about dropping out of law school to become a social worker. He's building a narrative that you're unstable, that you've always been difficult and ungrateful." Jasper's expression was pained. "I'm telling you this because you need to know what's coming." After he left, I sat down at my kitchen table and pulled up the email from the court again. I read through the entire filing this time, every word. And there, buried in the 3rd paragraph, I found it. A statement that the personal representative had attempted to contact all potential heirs, and that Reid Palmer had refused communication, indicating his lack of interest in the estate. A lie. A complete fabrication. I took a screenshot and sent it to Victoria with a message. They're claiming I refused contact. I have phone records that prove otherwise. Her response came back within minutes. Perfect. Save everything. Every call, every text, every voicemail. We're building a case, and their lies are going to bury them. I spent the rest of the afternoon doing exactly that. I backed up my call logs to the cloud, took screenshots of every message, saved every voicemail to a separate folder. If they wanted to paint me as difficult and uncommunicative, I'd show the court exactly how much they'd tried to reach me, and how every single attempt had been manipulation rather than genuine concern. As the sun set outside my apartment window, casting long shadows across the floor, I realized something had shifted inside me. I wasn't the humiliated son walking out of Thanksgiving dinner anymore. I was someone with evidence, with allies, with the truth on my side. And this time, I wasn't backing down. The next morning started with coffee and a plan. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, a legal pad covered in notes, and 3 file folders Victoria had given me when I'd stopped by her office the previous evening. She'd worked late preparing our initial court filings, and I'd agreed to gather everything I could that might support our case. Evidence wins cases, she'd told me. Emotion doesn't. We need documentation, witnesses, anything that shows your grandmother's true intentions and your father's deception. I started with the easiest task, my financial records. I pulled up my bank statements for the past 5 years and began going through them methodically. There, in regular monthly entries, were the deposits I'd made to help Grandma with various expenses. $50 here, $100 there, once a $500 emergency payment when her furnace broke in the middle of winter and she'd been too proud to ask Dad for help. Each transaction had a memo line where I'd noted what it was for. Groceries, medication copays, property tax shortfall, new water heater. I printed all of it, highlighting the relevant entries, organizing them by date in a separate folder. This proved I'd been involved in Grandma's life, that I'd cared about her welfare in tangible, documentable ways. Next, I went through my email archives. I was looking for correspondence with Grandma, proof of our relationship, evidence that we'd been close. She'd never been much for technology, but occasionally she'd send short messages, usually asking questions about her computer or her phone. I found dozens of them, spanning years. But what caught my attention were the emails from about 8 months ago when she'd first started having health problems. She'd written to me about updating her estate plan, about making sure things were taken care of properly. One email in particular made me pause. "Reid, I met with Victoria again today. We finalized everything. I want you to know that I've made sure the house and the business assets will go to someone who appreciates what they represent. Your father thinks money is about control. You understand it's about responsibility. That makes all the difference. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Love, Grandma." I read it 3 times, feeling the weight of her words. She'd known. Even 8 months ago, she'd known there might be a fight over her estate. And she'd tried to prepare me for it. I forwarded the email to Victoria with a note. This shows her intent. She wanted me to have the assets specifically because she knew I'd handle them responsibly. While I was deep in my email archives, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Mr. Palmer? This is Detective Sarah Chen with the Portland Police Bureau, Financial Crimes Unit." My stomach dropped. "Yes?" "I received a complaint this morning regarding potential fraud related to an estate matter. Your name was mentioned. Do you have time to come to the station and answer some questions?" "A complaint? From who?" "I can't disclose that over the phone, but I can tell you it's related to the estate of Helen Palmer. Can you come in today?" I looked at the clock. It was barely 9 in the morning. I need to call my attorney first. "Of course. Here's my direct number." She rattled off the digits, and I wrote them down with shaking hands. "I'll be here until 5. After we hung up, I immediately called Victoria. She answered on the second ring, and I explained the situation. "Don't panic," she said, though I could hear the concern in her voice. "This is actually not surprising. Your father is trying to control the narrative. He probably filed a police report claiming you were interfering with estate administration or making false claims about the will. Can he do that?" "He can file a report. Whether it goes anywhere is another matter entirely." I heard papers rustling on her end. "Here's what we do. I'll call Detective Chen, and arrange a time for us to go in together, this afternoon if possible. We'll bring copies of the real will, your documentation, everything. We'll show them exactly what's happening here. Okay. Reid, listen to me. This is a scare tactic. They're trying to intimidate you into backing down. Don't let it work. After we hung up, I sat for a moment, trying to steady my breathing. Then I went back to work. If Dad wanted to play hardball, I'd show him I could match him. I pulled up my contacts and started making calls. First was my old supervisor from the community center where I'd worked during grad school. Martha Reynolds had known Grandma through volunteer work they'd done together at a homeless shelter downtown. "Reid," Martha said warmly when she answered. "How are you holding up? I heard about Helen. I'm so sorry." "Thank you, Martha. Actually, I'm calling because I need a favor. Would you be willing to write a letter describing Grandma's character and her relationship with me?" There was a pause. "This is about the will, isn't it?" "How did you know?" "Honey, your grandmother told me months ago that she was worried about what would happen after she died. She said your father was pressuring her to change her estate plan, wanted her to leave everything to Piper. She refused, but she was afraid he'd try something." Martha's voice softened. "She told me you were the only one who really understood what she'd built, that you were the one who should carry it forward. Of course I'll write a letter. I'll have it to you by tomorrow." I thanked her and moved on to the next call, then the next. By lunchtime, I had commitments from 5 different people who'd known both Grandma and me, who could testify to our relationship and her intentions. Victoria called back around 1. "We're meeting Detective Chen at 3. I'll pick you up at your apartment at 2:30. Dress professionally, bring your documentation, and whatever you do, don't volunteer information. Answer her questions directly and honestly, but don't elaborate unless I tell you to." Got it. I spent the next hour reviewing everything I'd gathered, making sure it was organized and easy to reference. Bank statements in one folder, emails in another, contact information for witnesses in a third. I changed into my interview clothes, the same outfit I'd worn to meet with Victoria the first time. At exactly 2:30, Victoria pulled up outside my apartment in a sleek black sedan. I climbed in, the folders clutched against my chest. "You ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be." The drive to the police station was quiet. Victoria navigated through downtown traffic with practiced ease while I stared out the window, watching the city slide past. We parked in a visitor lot and walked together to the main entrance. Inside, the station was exactly what you'd expect. Fluorescent lights, linoleum floors, the smell of bad coffee and industrial cleaning products. Victoria approached the front desk and spoke to the officer there, who made a phone call. A few minutes later, a woman in her 40s appeared, wearing slacks and a blazer, her detective's badge clipped to her belt. "Miss Hartley? Mr. Palmer?" "I'm Detective Chen. Thank you for coming in." She shook our hands and gestured toward a hallway. "Let's talk in one of the interview rooms." We followed her down a corridor and into a small room with a metal table and 4 chairs. No mirror, I noticed. This wasn't an interrogation, just a conversation. Still, my palms were sweating. Detective Chen sat across from us and pulled out a notepad. "Mr. Palmer, I'll get right to it. This morning, I received a complaint from Thomas Palmer, your father. He's alleging that you've been harassing family members, making false claims about your grandmother's will, and attempting to interfere with the proper administration of her estate. He's requesting a restraining order and wants us to investigate potential fraud on your part." Victoria pulled out a document before I could respond. "Detective, before my client says anything, I'd like you to look at this. It's the actual last will and testament of Helen Palmer, drafted by my firm and properly executed 6 weeks before her death." Detective Chen took the document and read through it carefully. Her expression didn't change, but I saw her eyebrows rise slightly when she reached the section detailing the distribution of assets. "This is substantially different from the will that was filed with the probate court," she said finally. "Yes," Victoria replied, "because the will filed with the court is fraudulent. Mr. Palmer's father fabricated a document and filed it as genuine. We have witnesses who can testify to the timeline, to Helen Palmer's actual intentions, and to Thomas Palmer's efforts to deceive both the family and the court." Detective Chen set the will down and looked at me. "Mr. Palmer, tell me about your relationship with your grandmother." And so I did. I talked about the lunches we'd shared, the conversations about her business, the financial help I'd provided, I showed her the bank statements, the emails, the evidence of a genuine, caring relationship. Victoria occasionally interjected with legal clarifications, but mostly she let me tell the story. When I finished, Detective Chen sat back in her chair. "Do you have proof that the will filed with the court is not the one your grandmother actually signed?" Victoria nodded. "The original executed will is in our vault. We can provide handwriting analysis, testimony from the witnesses who were present at the signing, and evidence that Thomas Palmer was actively working to create a fraudulent document weeks before Thanksgiving." "Who are these witnesses?" "I'll provide their names and contact information, but I'd prefer to do so through formal channels. Some of them are afraid of retaliation from Mr. Palmer." Victoria pulled out another folder. "What I can give you now is a sworn statement from Jasper Palmer, Thomas's brother, indicating that Thomas asked him to review what he claimed was Helen's will, seeking validation that it looked legitimate." Detective Chen took the statement and read it. Her expression grew more serious with each paragraph. "This is going to require a full investigation," she said finally. "Estate fraud, potential identity theft if he forged signatures, obstruction of justice if he knowingly filed false documents with the court." She looked at me. "Mr. Palmer, I'm not going to file charges against you. Based on what I'm seeing here, you're the victim, not the perpetrator. But I need you to understand that this investigation is going to take time, and it's going to get very difficult for your family." "I understand." "And you're sure you want to proceed?" I thought about Grandma's email, about her belief that I understood responsibility. I thought about the house on Belmont Avenue, about the years of hard work she'd put into building something meaningful. "I'm sure." Detective Chen nodded and stood. "Then I'll be in touch. Ms. Hartley, expect a call from me tomorrow about next steps." We left the station together, Victoria and I, walking back to her car in silence. Once we were inside, she turned to me. "You did well in there. You were calm, direct, honest. That's going to matter when this gets to court." "When, not if." "Oh, it's definitely going to court. Your father isn't going to back down without a fight." She started the engine. "But neither are we." She drove me back to my apartment, and as I climbed out of the car, she called after me. "Reid, get some rest tonight. Tomorrow we start preparing for war." I went inside and immediately collapsed on my couch, exhausted despite it being only late afternoon. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You're making a mistake. Walk away now before you destroy this family." I deleted it without responding and turned off my phone. Tomorrow could bring whatever it wanted. Tonight, I just needed to breathe. Sleep didn't come easy that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of my apartment building settling around me. Someone's TV hummed through the wall. A car alarm went off in the parking lot. And somewhere above me, footsteps creaked across old floorboards. Normal sounds, the kind that usually faded into background noise. But tonight, they felt amplified, each one pulling me further from rest. Around 2 a.m, I gave up trying. I got out of bed, made tea instead of coffee, and sat by the window watching the street below. Portland at night had a certain quality to it, a quietness that felt both peaceful and lonely. Streetlights cast orange pools on the pavement, and occasionally a car would drift past, headlights cutting through the darkness before disappearing around a corner. I found myself thinking about a place I hadn't visited in years, Morrison Park, on the west side of town. It was one of those neighborhood parks that most people drove past without noticing. Nothing special about it, except for the old oak tree in the center and the 2 benches underneath it. Grandma used to take me there when I was young, back when Mom was still alive and Dad was just starting to show his true colors. By the time the sky started lightening, I'd made a decision. I needed to go back there, needed to remember who I was before everything got complicated. I arrived at Morrison Park just after dawn. The air was crisp, carrying that particular November chill that makes your breath visible. Fallen leaves covered the walking paths in shades of rust and gold, and the old oak tree stood exactly as I remembered it, massive and patient, its branches mostly bare now but still reaching toward the sky with quiet dignity. How? The bench was still there too, the one on the east side where Grandma always preferred to sit because it caught the morning sun. I sat down slowly, running my hand over the weathered wood. Someone had carved initials into the armrest at some point, but otherwise it was unchanged. I was 7 years old the first time Grandma brought me here. It was right after Mom died, sudden and unexpected, a brain aneurysm that took her in the middle of a normal Tuesday. Dad had retreated into himself, spending 18-hour days at his office, leaving Piper and me with a rotating cast of babysitters who never stayed long enough to learn our names. Grandma had shown up one morning, took one look at the state of our house, the unwashed dishes and unopened mail, and packed us both into her car. She'd driven us here, to this park, and we'd spent the entire day under this tree. Piper had run around the playground equipment, too young to really understand that Mom wasn't coming back. But I'd known. I'd felt the weight of it. That permanent absence. Grandma had sat with me on this bench and told me something I'd never forgotten. "Reid," she'd said, her arm around my shoulders, "loss is going to try to define you. It's going to whisper that you're not enough, that you deserve to be left behind. But here's what I know about you already. At 7 years old, you have a heart that feels deeply. And that's not a weakness. That's strength. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." I'd cried then, finally, after days of holding it in, and she'd let me, never once telling me to be strong or to stop. She'd just held me and let the grief run its course. The memory felt sharp now, sitting here decades later, like something that had happened yesterday instead of 23 years ago. After Mom died, things changed fast. Dad threw himself into work with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He'd always been ambitious, but now it became consuming. He started his real estate development company within 6 months, leveraging connections and loans and every resource he could access. And he started shaping Piper into his image of a perfect daughter, polished, obedient, impressive on paper. I remembered being 12, maybe 13, sitting at the dinner table while Dad praised Piper's latest achievement. She'd won some award at school, Student of the Month or something similar. He'd beamed at her, told her she was destined for greatness, that she'd inherited his drive and his vision. Then he'd turned to me, and his expression had shifted. "Why can't you be more like your sister? She understands what it takes to succeed." I'd wanted to say that maybe I didn't want his version of success. That maybe I cared about different things, like the books I read or the volunteer work I did at the animal shelter on weekends. But I'd learned by then that disagreeing with Dad only made things worse. Grandma had been the only one who saw me differently. She'd encouraged my reading, bought me books on philosophy and social justice, told me that kindness was its own form of strength. When I decided to study social work in college instead of business or law, Dad had been furious. He'd called it a waste, said I was throwing away my potential. Grandma had taken me to lunch that day, to a small cafe downtown where they made excellent soup and even better conversation. She looked at me across the table, her eyes warm and proud, and said, "You're choosing to help people who need it most. That's not a waste, Reid. That's a calling. Don't ever apologize for that." I pulled out my phone now, sitting on that bench, and scrolled through my photos. I didn't keep many, wasn't sentimental in that way, but there were a few of Grandma. One from her 80th birthday party, her smile genuine despite being surrounded by family members who were already calculating their inheritance. Another from a random Tuesday afternoon when I'd stopped by her house unannounced and found her in the garden, dirt under her fingernails and satisfaction on her face. And then there was the last photo I'd taken, about 2 weeks before she died. She'd been in the hospital by then, tethered to machines and monitors, but she'd insisted on getting dressed in real clothes instead of a hospital gown. "I'm not dead yet," she'd said with a wry smile. "No reason to look like a corpse." We'd talked that day about legacy, about what it means to leave something behind. She'd told me she wasn't afraid of dying, just afraid of being forgotten or misunderstood. "I built something real," she'd said, her voice raspier than usual. "Not just the business, but a life based on integrity. That's what I want to pass on, Reid. Not just money or property, but the understanding that how you make it matters just as much as what you make." I'd promised her then that I understood, that I'd honor what she'd built. I hadn't known at the time that I'd have to fight my own father to keep that promise. A jogger passed by on the path, earbuds in, lost in their own world. The sun had risen fully now, burning off the early morning mist. I stood up from the bench and walked over to the oak tree, placing my palm against its rough bark. There was something carved into the trunk, about chest height. I'd forgotten about it until now, but seeing it brought everything rushing back. 2 sets of initials inside a lopsided heart, HP plus RP. Grandma and I had carved this together when I was 15, right after Dad had screamed at me for choosing a state school over an Ivy League university. She'd brought me here to calm down, and we'd sat under this tree for hours. Before we left, she'd pulled out a pocket knife, the one she always carried, and carefully etched our initials into the bark. "This tree has been here for over 100 years, she'd said as she worked. "It'll be here long after we're both gone. Let this be a reminder that some things last, Reid. Some connections are permanent, even when everything else changes." I traced the carved letters with my finger now, feeling the grooves worn smooth by weather and time. The tree had grown around the carving, incorporating it into its structure, making it a part of itself rather than just a mark on its surface. That's what Grandma had been to me. Not just someone who passed through my life, but someone who'd become part of my foundation, part of how I understood myself and the world. Losing her had felt like losing that foundation. But maybe that wasn't quite right. Maybe she hadn't been the foundation itself. Maybe she just helped me see that I'd been building my own foundation all along, and now it was strong enough to stand on without her. I pulled out my phone and called Victoria, even though it was barely 7 in the morning. She answered on the 3rd ring, sounding more alert than anyone had a right to be at this hour. "Reid, everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, "I'm okay. I just wanted to tell you something." "I'm listening." "Whatever happens in court, whatever my father throws at us, I'm not backing down. Not because of the money or the house, but because Grandma trusted me to protect what she built. And I'm not going to let her down." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was softer. "She chose well, Reid. She chose very well." After we hung up, I took one more look at the tree, at the carved initials, at the bench where Grandma had taught me that grief was just love with nowhere to go. Then I walked back to my truck and drove home. I had work to do, evidence to organize, witnesses to prepare, a case to build, but more than that, I had a promise to keep. The apartment felt different when I walked back inside, less like a hiding place and more like a headquarters. I made breakfast, actual food instead of just coffee, and sat down at my kitchen table with renewed purpose. My phone buzzed with a text from Cousin Eric. "Heard you're taking Dad and Piper to court. Don't know all the details, but wanted you to know I'm not picking sides. That's not how family should work." I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, "Thanks, that means more than you know." Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. "Last chance to walk away clean. After this, there's no going back." I deleted it without responding. They were right about one thing. There was no going back. But that was fine with me. I'd spent too long looking backward anyway, too long trying to earn approval from people who'd never planned to give it. It was time to move forward. And this time, I was doing it on my own terms. 3 days later, I was sitting in my apartment going through financial statements when someone knocked on my door. It was just after 8 in the evening, late enough that unexpected visitors felt intrusive. I looked through the peephole and saw a woman I didn't recognize, mid-50s maybe, wearing a gray peacoat and holding a manila envelope. I opened the door cautiously, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Can I help you?" "Reid Palmer?" She had a crisp, professional voice, the kind that suggested she was used to being listened to. "Yes." "My name is Allison Hughes. I was your grandmother's accountant for the past 19 years. I need to speak with you about something urgent." I unlatched the chain and opened the door fully. "Come in." She stepped inside, glancing around my modest apartment with an expression that suggested she'd seen worse, but also seen much better. I gestured toward the small living room, and we both sat down, her on the couch, me in the armchair across from it. "I apologize for showing up unannounced," she began, setting the envelope on the coffee table between us. "But I've been trying to reach you by phone for 2 days, and your voicemail box is full." I winced. I'd been ignoring so many calls from family members that I'd stopped checking messages altogether. "Sorry about that. What's this about?" Allison leaned forward, her hands clasped together. "I was out of town when your grandmother passed away, a conference in Chicago that had been scheduled for months. When I got back and heard about the estate situation, about the will that was filed with the court, I knew something was wrong." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "Your grandmother and I met every quarter to review her finances. She was meticulous about her record-keeping, wanted to understand every dollar coming in and going out. During our last meeting, which was about 7 weeks before she died, she specifically discussed her estate plan with me. She told me she'd just updated her will with Victoria Hartley and wanted to make sure her financial accounts aligned with her wishes. Allison pulled a document from the envelope and slid it across the table. This is a copy of notes I took during that meeting. Your grandmother was very clear. The house on Belmont Avenue was to go to you. The investment portfolio was to go to you. She wanted Piper to receive the jewelry collection and a cash gift, but the bulk of the estate was meant for you. I picked up the document, scanning the neat handwritten notes. There, in black ink, were bullet points outlining exactly what Victoria's will had said. My name appeared again and again, next to asset descriptions and account numbers. Why didn't you come forward earlier? I asked. Because until yesterday, I didn't know there was a problem. Your father has been calling my office repeatedly since the funeral, claiming to be handling the estate administration. He asked for account information, for tax documents, for a complete financial picture. I gave him what he requested because I assumed he was the executor. It wasn't until my assistant mentioned seeing a news article about an estate dispute that I looked into it more carefully. Allison pulled out another document, this one a printed email. This is from your father, sent 5 days after your grandmother's funeral. He's asking me to provide documentation that would support a claim that your grandmother had significant debts, that the estate might be insolvent. He wanted me to manufacture a financial crisis that didn't exist. I read the email, my jaw tightening with each sentence. Dad had been thorough, asking for specific numbers, requesting that Allison review the accounts carefully for any irregularities or obligations that might reduce the estate's value. What did you tell him? I told him the truth. Your grandmother's finances were in excellent shape. No significant debts beyond normal monthly expenses. Investment accounts performing well. Property taxes current. There was no financial crisis. Allison's expression hardened. He didn't like that answer. He called me personally and suggested that perhaps I'd missed something, that maybe I needed to look more carefully. When I refused to change my assessment, he became hostile. Told me I'd better be prepared to defend my professional opinion in court. He's trying to devalue the estate, I said slowly, understanding dawning. If he can make it look like Grandma died broke or in debt, it would support his narrative that the will shouldn't matter, because there's nothing left to inherit anyway. Exactly. And it gets worse. Allison pulled out a third document, this one a bank statement. This is from your grandmother's primary checking account. Look at the transaction from September 15th. I scanned the page and found the date. There was a withdrawal for $75,000, marked as a transfer to an external account. What is this? That's what I wanted to know, so I did some digging. The receiving account belongs to an LLC called Belmont Property Holdings. And guess who's listed as the managing member of that LLC? Let me guess, my father? Close, your sister Piper. But your father is listed as the financial officer. Allison tapped the document. Your grandmother didn't authorize this transfer, Reid. I'm certain of it. She would have called me before moving that kind of money, would have wanted to discuss the tax implications. And there's no corresponding note in her records. No explanation for why she'd suddenly fund an LLC she never mentioned in our 19 years of working together. The room felt like it was tilting slightly. They stole from her. I can't prove it yet, but yes, I believe they accessed her account fraudulently and transferred funds to an entity they control. And I'd bet anything they're planning to claim it was a legitimate gift or loan, something that reduces what's left in the estate. There's one more thing, Howard said, pulling up another document. I found correspondence between your father and a bank manager dated 6 months ago. Your father was trying to get power of attorney over your grandmother's accounts, claiming she was mentally incompetent and needed someone to manage her finances. The bank denied the request because your grandmother came in personally and told them she was perfectly capable of handling her own affairs. She knew, I said quietly. She knew he was trying to take control, and she stopped him. Victoria nodded. And that's probably when he decided he needed a different strategy. If he couldn't control her assets while she was alive, he'd rewrite her will to control them after her death. We spent the next 3 hours going through every piece of evidence, building timelines, preparing for every possible argument Dad's lawyers might raise. By the time I left Victoria's office, it was dark outside, and my head was spinning with information. But underneath the exhaustion and the anger, there was something else, certainty, We had the truth on our side, documented and irrefutable. And on Friday, everyone would finally see what my father really was. The call came Wednesday evening, 2 days before the emergency court hearing. I was making dinner, something simple, pasta with vegetables, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy amid the legal chaos. My phone rang with a number I recognized immediately, my father's office line. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello? Reid. Dad's voice was clipped, controlled, but I could hear the strain underneath. We need to talk, in person. Anything you need to say can go through Victoria. This is between us, father and son. It doesn't need to involve lawyers. A pause. I'm asking you to meet me. 1 hour. Just the 2 of us. Every instinct told me to refuse, to hang up, and let Victoria handle all communication. But there was something in his voice, a crack in that usual armor of authority that made me curious. Where? I asked finally. The house, 8 o'clock. He hung up before I could respond. I immediately called Victoria and told her about the conversation. She was quiet for a moment, then sighed. If you go, and I'm not saying you should, keep your phone on and recording. Don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. And if he makes any threats, leave immediately. You think he'd threaten me? Reid, he's already committed fraud, theft, and possibly forgery. I don't know what he's capable of at this point, and neither do you. She was right, of course. But I found myself getting in my truck anyway, driving across town toward the house I'd grown up in. The house I'd been banished from on Thanksgiving. I turned on my phone's voice recorder and slipped it into my shirt pocket, microphone facing out. The driveway looked the same as it had a week ago. Pristine, expensive cars lined up like sentries, landscape lighting illuminating the perfectly manicured lawn. I parked on the street and walked up to the front door. Before I could knock, it opened. Dad stood in the entrance, wearing casual clothes, slacks and a button-down shirt, no tie. He looked older than I remembered, lines deeper around his eyes and mouth. Come in. I stepped inside. The house was quiet, no sounds of other family members. Where's everyone else? I sent Piper to stay with your aunt for a few days. We're alone. He gestured toward his study. In here. The study was exactly as I remembered it from childhood. Dark wood paneling, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with legal texts and business manuals. A massive desk that had always seemed designed to intimidate. Dad sat behind the desk, and I took one of the chairs across from him, deliberately not sitting all the way back, keeping myself ready to leave at any moment. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between calculation and something that might have been regret in a different person. You've made quite a mess, he said finally. I've made a mess? Hiring lawyers, talking to the police, involving accountants in private family matters. You're airing our dirty laundry for everyone to see. He leaned forward, hands clasped on the desk. Do you have any idea what this is doing to our reputation, to the family name? The family name? I felt anger rising in my chest, but kept my voice level. You committed fraud, Dad. You forged Grandma's will, stole hundreds of thousands of dollars from her accounts, and tried to cut me out of her estate completely. But sure, I'm the one damaging the family reputation. His jaw tightened. You don't understand how the real world works. Your grandmother was old, she was sick, and she was making poor decisions. Someone had to take control before she gave everything away to charity or wasted it on foolish investments. She wasn't making poor decisions, she was making decisions you didn't like. There's a difference. She was going to give you everything, Dad said, his voice rising slightly. You, who threw away every opportunity I provided, who rejected the family business to become a social worker, who never understood what it takes to build real wealth. What would you even do with that house? That money? You'd probably give it all away to your nonprofit friends and feel good about yourself while accomplishing nothing. There it was, the core of it all. Not concern for Grandma's wishes or the family's well-being, but his fundamental belief that I was unworthy, that I'd somehow failed by choosing a different path than the one he'd laid out. Grandma didn't think I'd waste it, I said quietly. She trusted me to honor what she built, to use it responsibly. That's why she left it to me. She was sentimental. She let her emotions cloud her judgment. Dad pulled open a drawer in his desk and extracted a folder. "But that can still be fixed. I'm prepared to make you an offer." "I don't want your offer." "Hear me out." He opened the folder, revealing several documents. "I'll give you $200,000 cash, transferred to your account within 48 hours. In exchange, you drop the legal challenges, acknowledge the will I filed as legitimate, and sign a statement saying you have no further claim to the estate." I stared at him, genuinely shocked. "You're trying to buy me off?" "I'm trying to resolve this situation in a way that benefits everyone. $200,000 is more than enough to set you up comfortably. You could pay off your student loans, buy a better place, maybe even take some time off work. All you have to do is walk away and let this go." "Let it go?" I repeated. "Let go of the fact that you humiliated me in front of the entire family? Let go of the fact that you stole from your own mother? Let go of the truth?" "The truth," Dad said coldly, "is whatever story people believe. And right now, you're fighting a losing battle. I have resources, connections, lawyers who will tie you up in court for years. You'll spend everything you have and still lose in the end. So take the money, Reid. Take it and save yourself the pain." I stood up slowly, looking down at him behind his oversized desk. For years, I'd felt small in this room, intimidated by his presence and his certainty. But standing here now, I realized something fundamental had changed. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked desperate. "You want to know what Grandma told me the last time I saw her?" I asked. "She said that integrity isn't about doing the right thing when it's easy. It's about doing the right thing when it costs you something." When I asked what she meant, she smiled and said I'd understand soon enough. I pulled out my phone, stopped the recording, and held it up so he could see. "This entire conversation is documented. Your bribe, your admission that you took control of her finances against her wishes, all of it." Dad's face went pale, then flushed red. "You recorded me? In my own house? You taught me to protect myself, remember? To always have leverage." I turned toward the door. "See you in court on Friday." "Reid, wait." His voice stopped me at the threshold. I turned back. He was standing now, one hand pressed against the desk like he needed it for support. "If you go through with this, if you testify against me, there's no coming back from it. You'll be alone. No family, no support system. Is that really what you want?" I thought about that for a moment, about what he was really saying. That family, in his definition, only existed as long as I was willing to be complicit in his lies. That love was conditional on my silence. "I've been alone for a long time, Dad. I just didn't realize it until recently." I met his eyes one last time. "The difference is, now I'm choosing it." I walked out of the study, through the entryway, and out the front door. The cool night air hit my face, and I took a deep breath, feeling lighter than I had in days. My phone buzzed as I reached my truck. A text from Piper. "Dad said you came by the house. Whatever he offered you, take it. This doesn't have to destroy everything." I typed back, "It already destroyed everything. I'm just making sure everyone knows who did the destroying." Another text came immediately. "You're choosing money over family." My response was simple. I'm choosing the truth. If that cost me a family built on lies, so be it. I drove away from that house for what I knew would be the last time. Not with anger, not with sadness, but with a strange sense of peace. Tomorrow I'd prepare for court. Tomorrow I'd review documents and practice testimony and do all the practical work of seeking justice. But tonight, I'd done something more important. I'd looked my father in the eye and refused to be intimidated. I'd chosen integrity over comfort, truth over acceptance. And for the first time in my life, I felt like the person Grandma always believed I could be. Friday morning arrived with gray skies and the threat of rain. I stood in front of my bathroom mirror, adjusting my tie for the third time, hands steadier than I expected them to be. The recording from Wednesday night was already in Victoria's possession, along with a transcript she'd had prepared overnight. Everything was ready. My phone buzzed with a message from Victoria, arriving at Courthouse in 20. "Meet me at the north entrance. Come prepared for cameras." Cameras. I hadn't thought about that. Of course there would be media. Estate fraud involving a prominent family, accusations of elder abuse. It was exactly the kind of story local news outlets loved. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The Multnomah County Courthouse stood downtown, an imposing building of stone and glass that had witnessed countless legal battles over the decades. When I pulled into the parking garage, I could already see news vans positioned near the main entrance, satellite dishes extended toward the cloudy sky. I found Victoria waiting by the north entrance as promised, her briefcase in one hand, phone in the other. She looked up as I approached and gave a slight nod of approval at my appearance. "Remember," she said quietly, "no comments to the press, not yet. We let the evidence speak first, then we control the narrative." "Understood." We walked toward the entrance together. I counted 3 news crews, cameras already rolling as we approached. A reporter I vaguely recognized from the local evening news stepped forward with a microphone. "Mr. Palmer, can you comment on the allegations against your father?" I kept walking, eyes straight ahead, just as Victoria had instructed. Another reporter tried from a different angle. "Is it true you've accused your family of stealing from your grandmother?" Victoria's hand on my elbow guided me steadily forward. We pushed through the glass doors and into the relative quiet of the courthouse lobby. Security checkpoint, metal detectors, the usual bureaucratic barriers between the outside world and the machinery of justice. "You did well," Victoria said as we collected our belongings from the security bins. "They'll run footage of us entering, looking confident and prepared. That matters more than people think." We took the elevator to the 3rd floor, where the probate courtrooms were located. The hallway was lined with wooden benches, most of them empty this early in the morning. Victoria checked her watch. "Judge Morrison is usually prompt. We have about 15 minutes." She gestured toward a small conference room off the main hallway. "Let's review one more time." Inside the conference room, she spread documents across the table, a visual timeline of everything we'd uncovered. Bank statements showing the fraudulent transfers, Allison Hughes's meeting notes, Howard Kimmel's forensic analysis, the recording from my father's study. "The judge has already reviewed our emergency filing," Victoria explained. "She knows the basics of what we're alleging. Today is about establishing enough evidence to justify freezing all estate assets and ordering a full investigation. We're not trying to win the whole case today, just this battle. What if Dad's lawyers challenge the recording? Oregon is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows about the recording, it's legal. You knew, so we're fine." She looked at me seriously. "But Reid, I need to prepare you for something. Your father is going to have attorneys with him, probably expensive ones. They're going to try to paint you as a disgruntled son trying to cash in on a family tragedy. They'll bring up anything negative they can find about your past. There's not much to find. I've lived a pretty quiet life. Everyone has something. A speeding ticket, an argument with a neighbor, a bad review from a former employer. They'll use whatever they can to undermine your credibility." She paused. "Can you handle that without losing your composure?" I thought about the recording, about Dad's voice offering me money to disappear. Yes, I can handle it. A bailiff knocked on the door, court's convening in 5 minutes. We gathered our materials and walked down the hallway to courtroom 3C. The room was smaller than I expected, more functional than dramatic. The judge's bench dominated one end, with tables for attorneys on either side and a small gallery of seats behind a wooden railing. Dad was already there, sitting at the defendant's table with 2 lawyers I didn't recognize. Both wore expensive suits and carried themselves with the kind of confidence that comes from winning more often than losing. Dad saw me enter, and his expression hardened, but he didn't speak. Piper sat in the gallery behind him, arms crossed, her face carefully neutral. A few other family members I recognized were scattered throughout the seats. Aunt Kendall, Uncle Jasper, Cousin Eric, all of them watching, waiting to see how this would unfold. "All rise," the Honorable Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. Everyone stood as the judge entered, a woman in her early 60s with steel-gray hair and sharp eyes that suggested she'd heard every excuse and seen every trick the legal system had to offer. She took her seat and gestured for everyone else to do the same. "We're here today on an emergency motion filed by Reid Palmer, contesting the probate filing in the estate of Helen Marie Palmer and requesting immediate freezing of all estate assets pending investigation." Judge Morrison looked down at the documents in front of her. "I've reviewed the initial filings, and I have to say, This is one of the more troubling cases I've seen in recent memory. Ms. Hartley, you're representing the petitioner. Victoria stood. Yes, Your Honor. And who's representing Mr. Thomas Palmer and Ms. Piper Stone? One of the expensive lawyers stood smoothly. Gregory Winters, Your Honor, of Winters and Associates. I'm representing Mr. Thomas Palmer. My colleague, Ms. Rachel Brennan, is representing Ms. Piper Stone. Judge Morrison nodded. Very well. Ms. Hartley, this is your motion. Present your case. Victoria approached the bench with a folder containing our core evidence. Your Honor, the evidence we've gathered over the past week reveals a systematic pattern of financial exploitation and fraud. With the court's permission, I'd like to present testimony from 3 witnesses, starting with my client, Reid Palmer. Proceed. I stood and walked to the witness stand, raising my right hand as the bailiff administered the oath. My voice was steady as I swore to tell the truth. Then Victoria began asking questions, walking me through my relationship with Grandma, the Thanksgiving dinner confrontation, everything that had happened since. When she asked about Wednesday night's meeting with my father, I recounted the conversation carefully, sticking to facts, avoiding emotional language. Then Victoria played the recording. Dad's voice filled the courtroom, offering money for my silence, admitting he'd taken control of Grandma's finances. I watched the judge's expression shift as she listened, her lips pressing into a thin line. When the recording ended, she looked directly at my father's table. Mr. Winters, I assume you'll want to respond to this? Gregory Winters stood, his expression calm, despite the damning evidence. Your Honor, we believe this recording lacks proper context and... It's your client's voice, is it not? Yes, but... Offering money in exchange for dropping legal claims related to an estate? Winters hesitated. Your Honor, my client was simply trying to resolve a family dispute without further litigation. His offer was made in good faith. Judge Morrison's eyebrow raised slightly. Good faith generally doesn't require offering someone money to ignore potential fraud, Mr. Winters, but we'll return to this. Miss Hartley, your next witness? Victoria called Allison Hughes to the stand. The accountant testified clearly and professionally, explaining the quarterly meetings with Grandma, the detailed notes about estate planning intentions, and Dad's subsequent attempts to manufacture evidence of financial distress. Then came Howard Kimmel, the forensic accountant. He walked the court through his analysis, displaying charts and graphs that showed the pattern of unauthorized transfers, the forged signatures, the systematic draining of Grandma's accounts over 18 months. By the time he finished, the evidence was overwhelming. Even I, who knew all the details already, felt the cumulative weight of it all pressing down like a physical force. Judge Morrison called for a 15-minute recess. I stepped outside the courtroom with Victoria, my legs shaky from sitting still for so long. That went well, she said quietly. Better than I hoped, actually. The judge is clearly troubled by what she's hearing. When we returned to the courtroom, Judge Morrison didn't waste time. I've heard enough to justify immediate action. All assets of the estate of Helen Marie Palmer are hereby frozen, effective immediately. No transfers, no sales, no distributions until a full investigation is completed. She looked at Dad's table. Mr. Palmer, Ms. Stone, you are both ordered to provide complete financial records for the past 2 years to this court within 10 business days. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. She paused, letting that sink in. Furthermore, I'm removing Ms. Stone as personal representative of the estate and appointing a neutral third-party administrator until this matter is resolved. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sharp crack that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I looked across the courtroom to where Dad sat, his face ashen, his expensive lawyers whispering urgently in his ears. Piper had her head down, refusing to meet anyone's gaze. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something that wasn't anger or grief or exhaustion. I felt hope. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.